This content is not suitable for children and may contain depictions of violence.
Hi, I'm your host Cambo. Grab a beer and pull up a deck chair. This is True Crime Island, another true crime podcast. Well, Islanders, last week we had the case of Teresa Noor, who abused her 6 children and ended up killing 2 of them. Well, this week I bring you the opposite, where a child takes actions to get rid of her parents once and for all. It's a bit involved, so it's going to spill over into 2 episodes. Oh, and thank you, Pelly, who got back to me on the pronunciation of Chilliwack, which means going up the river as far as you can. Also, I'd like to say, and here's a photo, the limited edition Hot Pink 2020 logo t-shirts are on Bonfire, ready to order. Link in the description and on my website, truecrimeisland.com, Facebook and Twitter. Now, the orders will close 28th of July, and after that, they will produce them and ship them. So tonight I'll reference the Edmonton Journal, the National Post, York Regional Police interview tapes, the Vancouver Sun, and this book, A Daughter's Deadly Deception by Jeremy Grimaldi. Very good book. If you want to really get in depth in this case, I suggest you have a look. Okay, so I'm sure most of you have heard something about the Jennifer Pan case, especially for the Canadian Islanders. So yeah, we're off to Canada tonight, to 238 Helen Avenue, Markham, Unionville, Ontario. Markham has a predominantly Asian population, according to Google. And although not the cheapest area to live, it is cheaper than Toronto. It's regarded as a safe and desirable place to live with great food, plenty of parks, but apparently getting around is a bit of a hassle. So I don't know if anyone lives there, but apparently it is. It's regarded so safe that when the news filtered round on the morning of the 9th of November 2010 that there'd been a murderous home invasion, the local community was shocked, as nothing like that happened there. That type of thing happened elsewhere. Now, the story getting around was the home invasion by 3 men in Unionville that resulted in the murder of 53-year-old mother of 2, Bic Harpan, and the wounding of her 57-year-old husband, Huey Hahn, who was shot in the face. Now, miraculously, their 24-year-old daughter, Jennifer Pan, who was in the house at the time, was unharmed in the incident, and their son was away, Felix. So let me give you a bit of background on the Pan family. Now, Bic and Hahn, they were both refugees, or I think we call them asylum seekers now, from Vietnam. They came to Canada separately, and I read somewhere that Han came via Hong Kong as a political refugee or asylum seeker. They met and married. They settled in Scarborough. In 1986, they had a daughter, Jennifer, and in 1989, a son, Felix. They both worked at Magna International as a car parts manufacturer in Aurora, Ontario. Now, Han worked as a tool and die maker. Apparently, he was on the assembly line, while Bic assembled car parts. Now, they worked extremely hard. They saved and made sure their kids would have the opportunities that they hadn't had. In 2004, they were able to purchase a house in Unionville, Markham, and as I described it before, it was a desirable place to live. They were even able to buy a couple of nice cars for themselves. Han drove a Merc and Bic a Lexus. Now, I would take the Mustang anytime. Anyway, now, the Pan parents wanted the best for their kids and they pushed them hard to achieve their goals. Now, some would say it was their parents' goals. Now, I guess what you call it is tiger parents. And if we go to a quick definition of what that means, tiger parenting, that's a form of strict or demanding parenting. Tiger parents push and pressure their children to attaining high levels of academic achievement or success in high-status extracurricular activities such as music, and they usually want them to be doctors and dentists and all that. and they use authoritarian parenting methods. Now, Han Pan wanted his daughter Jennifer to become a doctor. His son Felix in 2010 was studying to become an engineer. Now, from an early age, Jennifer was pushed hard by her parents, taking piano lessons, and she would become a highly accomplished figure skater until an injury dashed her 2010 Vancouver Olympic dreams. She was humble, quiet, and soft-spoken. Now, she had a small, tight-knit circle of friends, approved, of course, by her parents. Now, she was expected to get straight A's at her school, the Mary Ward Catholic Secondary School, and she would be closely watched whenever she attended extracurricular activities. Her parents would drop her off and pick her up from school. She wasn't allowed to date or go to any school dances, and she was forbidden to attend any parties just in case it affected her schooling. At the start, she did get those straight A's, but as years went on, she slipped behind in her grades. So instead of disappointing her parents and probably suffering the tiger wrath, she started to forge school report cards to show that she had the required A grades. Now, this led her on a slippery slope of lies that would end in tragedy. Now, Jennifer was in the school band, and it's here that she will meet Daniel Wong. He was a year older than her, and they became friends. He was mixed Filipino and Chinese. Now, on a music excursion to Europe in 2003, Jennifer suffered an asthma attack from all the smokers in the auditorium they were playing in. Now, in Europe, they like to smoke cigarettes, so I can imagine what it was like. Now, she rushed out to get air, and Daniel was there to help her. And I guess this is the moment she fell in love with him, and they became a couple. They had to keep their relationship very secretive, as Mr. and Mrs. Pam would never approve of Jennifer having a boyfriend. In fact, they did meet him once apparently and told her not to associate with him as he was half Filipino. Jennifer was still excelling in music, winning many awards, but her other subjects suffered. She was even able to make money on the side teaching piano. Now, one of the subjects she failed was her calculus class, and this was at the end, year 12, that meant she lost her early admission to Ryerson University and she didn't graduate from high school. But that didn't stop Jennifer. She lied to her parents about graduating and that she was in fact going to Ryerson Uni. Now, she told her parents that her plan was to do 2 years of science, then transfer over to the University of Toronto's pharmacology program. Although Han wanted Jennifer to be a doctor, he knew she probably couldn't handle that, but a pharmacist was just as prestigious. Now, Jennifer had to portray the life of a uni student. Remember, she's not going to uni. She brought the usual school supplies and collected used biology and physics textbooks. She told her parents she had an OSAP, or Ontario Student Assistant Program loan, and had won a $3,000 scholarship. Now, she did this by showing them forged documents, but to them, it all looked very legit. So for 2 years, Jennifer would get ready as if she was actually attending uni, get on public transport, head downtown, but in reality, she would hang out at the library reading scientific journals and take notes in her textbooks to make it look like, to her parents, like everything was fine. She also spent time in cafes, working at a couple of pizza places. Daniel worked at one of them, taught piano lessons, and would go to visit Daniel at York Uni where he studied. Now, wow, you got to think, what a lie. Just thinking for those 2 years, she'd not only not graduated from high school, but she wasn't going to uni either. I mean, that's 2 years she did this. Now, just a side note here, Daniel, in his final year of high school, transferred from Mary Ward to Cardinal Carter Academy Art School in North York. He'd also been done for having 8 ounces of pot in his car. Ouch. What bit of a sting there, mate. It's a lot of pot. Anyway, Jennifer told her parents that she'd been accepted into the University of Toronto to study pharmacology. Her parents were really happy about this, and probably they let her have a little bit more freedom. And they did this by agreeing for her to stay at her friend's place, Topaz, as the journey was almost an hour and a half each way to school. But instead of staying with Topaz, she actually shacked up with Daniel at his parents' place. She told Daniel's parents that it was fine by her parents that she's able to stay there. Now, the lies are just compounding from Jennifer, but seeing as though it's in Canada, it's probably snowballing. There's so much fucking snow there. I'm stressed just thinking about the fact that she's putting on this charade for years. But how much stress this must have been causing her. I mean, she's getting nowhere year after year. And she hasn't just dropped a couple of subjects to do what she's doing. She hasn't even enrolled and hasn't even graduated high school. Anyway, they got to the stage where Jennifer should have been graduating from Toronto Uni. So there were more lies and deceptions to come. Her parents were asking her about the graduation ceremony, and of course, they wanted to see her grades. Now, Jennifer told her parents that tickets to the graduation were limited to one parent per graduate, as there were so many people graduating, and that she knew that both of her parents wanted to attend, but she couldn't choose which one. So she gave her ticket away to a friend so that her friend's parents could both attend. I mean, she's pretty good with these lies, isn't she? She even got Daniel to search online, and they were able to buy her a fake degree for $500. Whoa, after graduation day, Han's not stupid. He asked Jennifer for photos, and she quickly deflected his request by saying her friend had taken all the photos and she was currently on a plane back to Hong Kong. Jennifer then sent out some resumes with her fake degree on it, but she didn't get any callbacks. Okay, so now Jennifer told her parents she was volunteering at Sick Kids while job hunting. Now, Sick Kids is basically the corporate name for the hospital for sick children at Toronto. Now, funny enough, this volunteer job was Friday nights and weekends. I mean, funny that. It's when most young people want to go out and are probably not attending class or working a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday full-time job like Daniel wasn't. Now, Han and Bick started to get a little bit suspicious with this. Jennifer had no uniform and didn't seem to have an ID card. So one day, Han told Jennifer that he would drive her to work. In fact, he insisted he drive her and for Bick to come as well. Now, when they arrived at the hospital, Jennifer was shitting bricks. She bolted out of the car as fast as she could. She ran inside the emergency department with her mum not far behind. But she was able to find a place to hide, and she stayed there for a few hours. Still, her parents were sus. Bick called Topaz, where Jennifer's supposed to be staying all this time. So Bick called Topaz, and she called her early in the morning, and Topaz answered, still a bit sleepy, a bit groggy from the night before, you know what I mean. And she totally forgot that she was supposed to cover for Jennifer. And so when Bick asked her where she was, Topaz told her she didn't know. Now, Bick instantly called Jennifer on a mobile and demanded she come home instantly. Now, when Jennifer did arrive home, Han was pissed off. You can imagine. Now, the previous 4 years, as we know, all those lies are starting to come crashing down. There was no Ryerson Uni, no Uni of Toronto, and she hadn't even graduated high school. She'd just been shacked up with Daniel Wong, and her whole life was a lie. Now, Jennifer decided not to tell her parents the whole truth. Instead, she told them she was staying with Daniel, and that the Sick Kids job was fake. But she neglected to tell them she hadn't finished high school or attended Ryerson University. And she told them that her study at the University of Toronto was via correspondence, so she didn't have to attend classes. Now, fuck, you can imagine if the whole story had come out. Bick was pretty pissed off as it was. Anyway, Han wanted to throw her out of the house, but Bick calmed him down a little bit. Han wanted Jennifer to get her life back on track. He told her she had two choices: go back to school and stop seeing Daniel, or get out and go live with Daniel and never come back again. Now, he chopped this off by telling her that if she chose Daniel over the family, she could only come back to the house when he was dead. Now, Jennifer chose to come back home and finish off her schooling and get her life back on track. Now, maybe not her track, more her father's track. With this, though, came certain strict conditions. To start with, she had a complete grounding for 2 weeks. She couldn't go out, she couldn't have a mobile phone or laptop, but eventually she would be permitted to go out to do her piano lessons, and she would be driven there and back by either Bick or Han, and she definitely couldn't see Daniel. So Jennifer, she's in her early 20s at this stage, locked down at home, no way to communicate via phone, limited access via the family computer in the lounge room, and is constantly monitored by her parents. Now, her mum did let up a little bit, and she let her check her messages on her phone occasionally, but this was kept secret from Han. Now, she was treated like a 12-year-old rather than, say, a 22-year-old, constantly monitored, but she must have felt some relief from the burden of keeping up a lie or the double life that she was living previously. Still, she was separated from the love of her life, Daniel Wong. Now, she was able to get a few messages out to him and call him very occasionally when her mum gave her access to a phone just for a few minutes at a time to check if any job applications she'd sent had been replied to. But she was still locked up and lying to her parents. Now, this will become a theme throughout Jennifer's saga. She was so restricted in what her parents would let her do that the only way out other than leaving home and leaving the family unit was to cover up her tracks with half-truths, white lies, and all just outright bullshitting her parents. It just became second nature to her. Now, as time went on, Jennifer was allowed a few freedoms, like using her mobile and laptop while in the presence of her parents. She was even allowed to drive her mum's car to piano lessons, but the mileage would be checked before and after. But it didn't take long for her to screw everything up again. One night, Daniel had called her saying he needed her badly, and so Jennifer called one of his friends to come pick her up. Now, Jennifer snuck out of the house in the middle of the night. Now, she did the folding of the blankets thing where it looks like there's someone under the sheets, but no one's really there at all. Now, the problem is, the Bick had left her wallet in Jennifer's room the day before, and so she went into her room early in the morning to go get it, and she noticed the bedding didn't look right, because she's not just walking past the door and seeing this body under the blankets. She's actually in the room looking around for her wallet. Now, of course it didn't look right, so yeah, Jennifer was busted again. Next lie and fake job to try and get time out of the house was her fake pharmacy job at Walmart. She constantly told everyone about the job, friends, family, just anyone, building up this false narrative that she had it just to get a bit of time with Daniel. Now, Han, he was pretty suspicious again. Now, Jennifer had no uniform, no swipe card, as before with the sick kids job, but he pressed her for proof that she actually worked there. He asked for a pay slip, which she said pretty quickly was in her locker at work, and the next day she did show him one that she'd found actually on the internet and had forged her details into it. Still, he demanded he drive her to work the next day, and luckily for Jennifer, someone was coming out of the employee entrance when she slipped in. Now, she hid there for a while until she was sure her father left, and then she went to the library. But when she got home, Han demanded that she log into her bank account to show him the deposit of her wages. He's pretty cluey, this bloke. She then admitted that the hours were faked, but took the opportunity while her father was pissed off again to also admit that her enrolment at the University of Toronto was all bullshit as well. So I guess he's so mad, she'll just slip this. I haven't actually been going to uni for the last few years. Just slip that in at the same time. I mean, how mad can you get? Well, Han, from that moment on, he would never trust Jennifer again. Now, Jennifer was put into full lockdown again, this time permanently, and she was made to email Daniel to tell him the relationship was over and to stay away. Han was watching while she did this. Jennifer told her father that she owed him $3,000, and Han wrote her a check immediately, hoping this would bring some finality to her relationship with Daniel. So this constant surveillance of her every move really got to Jennifer. Friends and even her piano teacher told her that she should consider moving out. But Jennifer told them that her family was the most important thing and that she couldn't. Now, her piano teacher actually said that he thought it wasn't the family face thing that stopped her from moving out. It was more that she didn't want to lose the comforts of home and that she doubted being able to make it by herself. Who knows? Okay, now, I think we've got a bit of the drift on the life and times of Jennifer Pan at this point. So what comes next is probably the straw that breaks the camel's back. Daniel, at age 24 and having been in a relationship with Jennifer around 7 years, he finally makes the break. He stops answering most of her calls and doesn't reply to her messages, or most of them anyway. He moves on and he finds a new girlfriend called Christine. Now, the light at the end of the very long tunnel for Jennifer turns out to be the light of an incoming train, and this smashes her morale. Now, Jennifer tried to be a nuisance at this point to both Daniel and his new girlfriend, trying desperately to get them to break up. Now, this bit's a bit weird. To try and overcome being dumped and ignored, she contacts Daniel and told him that she'd answered a knock at the door and 5 Asian guys had broken their way in and gang raped her. She told him there was a mention to leave his new girlfriend alone, so as if she'd set these guys onto her. Obviously, this was trying to make out the new girlfriend had ordered the gang rape, and Jennifer hoped to get Daniel to dump his new love and take her back, just get a bit of attention, I suppose. She also told him that she'd received a bullet in the mail, and again was sort of inferring that the new girlfriend was behind it. Now, of course, both these stories were just lies, but that's how Jennifer operated. Lie to get what she wanted or needed. She'd been doing it for years. Okay, so let's move on to the reason why we're here talking about all this. On the night of the 8th of November at around 10 p.m, there's a frantic 911 call. Jennifer, with her hands bound behind her back and arm bound to a banister at the top of the stairs, is screaming down the phone to the operator. Now, this is a bit of what Jennifer said. "Help me, please, I need help. I don't know where my parents are. Some people just broke into our house and just stole all our money. I just heard shots, pops. I'm tied upstairs with my hands behind my back. I have my cell phone in my pocket. Please come help." Now, she then goes on to describe these attackers being 3 black males. She described what they were wearing, but also said they'd turned off all the lights, so she didn't really see them that well. She told them that they'd taken her parents downstairs, and that's when she heard these pops. Then in the background of the call, there's a blood-curdling scream. Jennifer's father has been racing through the lounge room from the basement out the front door, screaming. Now, he was either in pursuit of those attackers or trying to get the neighbours' attention, I don't know. Now, Jennifer calls out to her father, but he just doesn't stop to check on her. Now, soon police arrive and clear the house and cut Jennifer free. Hanpan has collapsed outside and is rushed to hospital with gunshot wounds to his face. Now, sadly, Big Pan is found dead in the basement with a gunshot wounds to the back of her head. Now, actually, Jennifer was able to see her father just as he was placed in the back of the ambulance, and she said to him, "Daddy, are you okay?" Now, Jennifer is physically unharmed and is taken to the hospital as well, just as a precaution, and she would end up being given some sedatives. Now, later at around midnight, she would be taken downtown for an interview by police. Hampan initially was rushed to Markham Stouffville Hospital, is that how you pronounce it? Stouffville Hospital, but was then airlifted to Central Toronto Trauma Centre. Now, if you want to watch all 3 interviews which Jennifer undergoes over the course of this investigation, they are in full on YouTube, and together they make up 9 hours. Now, I have watched them, and I've gone back over them a few times. I've actually watched them twice in their full length. Now, if you think Prince Andrew interviews are a train wreck, then you need to watch these. Once you actually know the complete story, it's like some sort of twisted reality show, watching these interviews unfold. So to view it as a 9-hour miniseries rather than 3 long interviews is probably the way to go. Anyway, in the initial interview, police need some information, of course, on the home invaders so they can start going to look for them. Jennifer tells them that her mother had come home at around 9 p.m. from her weekly dance lessons and was downstairs. Her brother was away studying. Her father was in his bedroom and was sleeping. The next thing she heard her mother calling out frantically for Han to come downstairs. Now, she heard her father go down the stairs and then heard other footsteps coming back up. Now, at the time, she was on a call to a friend and she told them she'd have to call them back, and she hung up. Next, she opened the door just a little to see what was going on, and she was faced by a black man with dreadlocks pointing a gun at her. Now, he told her to give him money, and she had some in a drawer. She opened that up and gave him $2,000 that she'd been saving from piano lessons. He then took her downstairs, where she could see both her parents on the couch with two of the other men. Her mother is sitting with her feet still in a water bath she used to soothe her feet after dancing. At least one had a revolver pointed at them. They were asking for money. Now, Jennifer was then tied up with shoelaces, her hands behind her back. She was taken back upstairs to the entry of her father's bedroom at gunpoint, while the second guy ransacked the room. Now, she says that they will find $1,100 left over from a holiday they went to the US. Now, she described the second guy as being black and wore a bandana to hide his face, and the third guy was black with a Caribbean accent, or Caribbean, I don't know. Next, she was bound to the banister upstairs by her arm with another shoelace, while she heard her parents being taken downstairs into the basement. One guy kept saying that this is taking too long, now hurry up. Then Jennifer says she heard pops, like gunshots, maybe 1, 2, 3 or 5 pops. Then the intruders left the house. She was able to get her cell phone out of her back pocket and dial 911. During the call, she then heard her father screaming as he ran out of the house. Now, the next thing, police arrive and cut her free. So that's what she says happened there. They'll then take her phone off her to copy it. Now, she seems a little bit worried about what they might find. She also seems worried when police tell her how many people they're going to interview, how broad this interview is going to be. So at first the police want descriptions of these intruders so they can get them off the street. As per Jennifer's description, they tell media that they're looking for 3 males. Now, one is male, black, 28 to 33 years old, 5 feet 7 with medium build. The second one is male, black, 31 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, thin build, wearing a hoodie and bandana over his face. And the third one, male, thin build with a Caribbean accent. But it isn't long before police start to feel that things don't add up with Jennifer's story. Now, first thing they thought was weird was when Han ran out of the house to try to either track down the crims or maybe get help from a neighbour. Whatever he was doing, wouldn't he first have gone to check to see if his daughter was okay? I mean, he didn't. Also, why keep a witness alive if they are quite prepared to kill 2 other people? And why didn't they even blindfold her at least? Now, home invasions, they are rare, and how did the intruders know that they wouldn't be faced by someone with a gun ready to protect themselves if this was just a random home invasion? And they were also a bit sceptical on how Jennifer, with her hands tied behind her back and one arm tied to the banister, was able to get the phone out of her pocket and be able to call 911. Now, one of the detectives, Detective Cook, he thought she was full of shit from the start, and the home invasion and murder was an inside job, well, for the reasons I just went through. But the department was divided into 2 camps. Jennifer is either the victim or the perpetrator. Now, Daniel Wong, he would be interviewed as well. He's really cool in his first interview. He was even falling asleep in the interview room when the investigators walked out for a while. Now, on November the 10th, Jennifer is interviewed for a second time. Now, they've clearly had time to check out some of Jennifer's story, and they conduct the interview with a completely different tone, like they already know she's lying. She looks very nervous. She's just wringing her hands non-stop. And the detective tells her to start like it's fresh. Don't worry about what she said the time before. Not to be nervous, and the truth is the best way to overcome her anxiety. Now, this interview, this is going to go on for 4 hours. Now, Jennifer is told there are certain penalties for lying or misleading police to investigate something that's not real, as she was cautioned in her last interview. But this time they seem very focused on this. Jennifer is there on her own. She doesn't have a lawyer, which you can imagine someone like Jeff Epstein, he probably would have for sure. Wherever he went to a police station, he's having a lawyer no matter what. Now, Jennifer will tell the investigator that she's worried she maybe will contradict what she said in the first interview. Now, reality is, if she is telling the truth, most of what she said in the previous interview will pretty much be the same. There'll be a few little things she might remember, or timelines might be a bit different. Now, they ask her if she had more than one phone, and this is where things start to really fall apart for her. She says now that she has one phone but 2 SIM cards. Now, she didn't mention this before, and also the $1,100 US that was mentioned stolen in her first interview, that just turns into $200. Now, Jennifer is asked to demonstrate how she got her phone out to call while being bound. Now, she does this, but she's just standing up. She's not bound or anything, but it's not really convincing. It looks like it could be possible, but honestly, it doesn't look that convincing at all. Now, the investigator brings up the fact that there is a safe fairly visible in the father's bedroom, and asked her if they saw it or she was asked for the combination. Now, at this stage, she's very vague on this point, and she says she doesn't know the combination and they must have overlooked it. How they can overlook it when they're ransacking the place, looking everywhere, and you're bloody safe? I don't know. It's sus, right? Now, then they go backwards in what happened. The reverse chronological technique, but this fucks her up a bit. Now she seems very nervous. But when she's recalling something that happened earlier in the day with her mum, like 10 o'clock in the morning, she's quite confident with that bit. But when it comes to recalling the home invasion, she's very slow to answer. And it looks like she's remembering each chunk, and then she's got to remember which lie goes with that chunk of what actually happened. And that's why she takes so long to answer the questions as she's going backwards in this timeline. Now, they just don't flow at all. Now, if you actually experience something, it would be like in chronological order. These events would be like a movie in your mind. But if you make shit up and scatter it amongst what really happens, it's extremely difficult to remember where you lied and extremely difficult to recall when asked to think about it, especially in reverse order. Now, Daniel Wong is mentioned here, and she's quizzed over her relationship with him. And they'll also discuss how Jennifer lied about attending university and how she kept it from her parents for so long. This is basically, you lie, you can lie, you can lie, you do it all right, you've been doing it for years, you're lying to us. They also ask how in 2007 and 8, Jennifer was busted by her parents when they came to pick her up at the mall and saw Daniel drop her off. Now, this would bring upon Jennifer one of the many ultimatums her parents would give. Might be some resentment, some motivation to get rid of him. In this interview, a second phone is revealed. Now, that was given to her by Daniel, and she also has this second SIM card. So from one phone, one SIM, there's now 2 SIM cards, now there's 2 phones. Now, she's asked about any threats she may have received in recent times. Now, this is where Jennifer talks about threats from Daniel's new girlfriend, Christine. But she didn't bring this up before, which puzzles the investigator. She then talks about the fake rape claim and the bullet in the mail, and that she told Daniel and how she only did this to get attention. Now, she doesn't mind dumping on this Christine girl, I tell you. This is Daniel's girlfriend, with regards to drugs and dealing. Now, she seems quite happy to divert the focus from herself, look at these drug dealers, don't look at me, to others, and especially when it comes to Christine. You see, the cops have some theory that this home invasion came about because of Jennifer's links to Daniel, because he's a drug dealer, and that maybe the Pan family might even had something to do with the drug dealing as well. But of course, this was not the case. They were wondering why this family had been targeted. Now, Jennifer is left alone for quite a while, a couple of times in this interview room, and she just gets up, she's pacing around, she just looks so nervous. Now, on resumption of the interview, this is where they bring up the safe in Hahn's room again. Now, why wasn't it discovered when the whole room had been ransacked? Why was it it was just in plain view. Now, she doesn't have any answer for this. Now, also, this second phone, which is a BlackBerry, they discuss this one. And also, because they've been tracking some of the phone calls and messages, they ask her about Daniel's recent conversations. Now, BlackBerry is found to be her main phone rather than the old phone she previously gave to police on the night of the invasion. Now, get this. She would end up having 3 phones. An iPhone, a flip phone, the one she gave the coppers on the first night, and a BlackBerry, her main phone. Now, this looks really sus now, like she's trying to hide something from the cops. What's on these phones, on these SIM cards? But, 3 phones, why don't you tell us about that? Why don't you give us some of this information? Now, if anyone remembers back in the day, around 2010, that Android phones and iPhones were relatively new, and that BlackBerry phones were the norm, especially for business users, because they were very secure. Now, I think by default, they were encrypted. Now, I remember if you didn't have the code to get in, you forgot it, you couldn't get in. You had to wipe the phone and then redo everything. Now, these were the go phones, other than, say, a burner phone, for criminals to keep their communications safe from the authorities. Now, it's probably a good phone to use when you are planning a murder or two or something like that. Now, Jennifer is also told there's surveillance cameras in her street and that the coppers are looking over it. This freaks her out a little bit as well. Then she's asked, how did they get in the house? Now, Jennifer said that when anyone ever comes to their house, the family, they sort of, one at a time, whoever was going to answer the door, they just creep up quietly towards the door so they could see who it was. And if they didn't want to answer the door, they sort of quietly come back again. I mean, I've done that a few times. I go over on a Sunday morning when the Joeys come knocking. But, now one thing I did pick up from this was that Jennifer told that when she was originally marched downstairs by the number 1 guy, she saw her mum sitting on the lounge, soaking her feet in the warm water that she used to soothe her feet after dancing. Now, if there was a knock at the door, Bic's not just going to go up and answer the door. She's going to creep up like she normally does, have a look, see who it was, before deciding to open the door. Now, if she did this like she always did, why did she answer to people she didn't know? And say she did, and they forced her way in, why is she gone to sit still back with her feet in the soaking her feet in water? You got this guy with a gun to your head. Oh, hang on a minute, my feet are sore. I'm just going to sit back down here. Thank you very much. So it looks more like these guys had just walked straight in the door. Door's unlocked. But Jennifer also said that early in the afternoon, they would always check and lock the doors. So at this time of night, 10 o'clock at night, the door will be locked. I mean, you can't just randomly say, oh, we forgot to do it on the same day we got a home invasion. There you go. Now, the interview, it's getting pretty tense at this stage, as you can imagine. And her lies to Daniel, her lies to her parents, these are brought up in the context of maybe she's lying to them now, the police. I mean, why wouldn't she be lying now? Now, Jennifer is extremely nervous now. She's really just wringing her hands like you wouldn't fucking believe. Now, her resentment for being locked up by her parents, that's brought up again, and the fact she can't go and see her boyfriend, Daniel. And then they actually ask her if she's involved in the murder of her mother, in this home invasion. Now, she's like, I wouldn't do that. She denies being involved, and very soon after that, they cut the interview. Now, as Jennifer leaves the building, she's informed that her 100-year-old grandfather, father of Big Pan, had just passed away. Now, that was just 2 days after her mum, this grandfather's daughter, had been murdered. Now, Hampan is still in a coma at this stage, but police are ready to interview him as soon as he wakes up. Okay, now, as I said at the start, I didn't really realise how much this was going to go on for, and we're probably just halfway, so I'm going to make this a 2-part episode, very sorry. There was just so much background to go into to understand Jennifer's mindset at the time, and also with her interviews, all 9 hours of them. They had so much detail that I had to try and condense and make a bit of sense for you. I've actually watched them completely through twice now. Now, the second time I did speed it up a bit just to get through it a little bit. But if you really like your true crime and you would like to watch these interviews, I suggest got to have a look at this. So next week, Pan comes out of his coma and gives his version of events. Jennifer is pulled in for a third interview. Thousands upon thousands of text messages and calls are cross-referenced from multiple people. There are arrests and trials, and ultimately some justice will fall upon the main instigators of such a shocking crime. So, that's the end of another episode. If you want to support the island, there are links in the description for Patreon, PayPal and merch. Please feel free to comment, like and subscribe. And I would truly appreciate if you share the channel. Hit the bell if you want to be notified, because I don't bleep out the swearing. I use the words like murder and fuck. The YouTube gods aren't going to promote this channel, so your subscription or sharing are really appreciated in getting more people to the island. The 1,000 subscriber is getting very close. I will have a separate little video for that so that you can post your comments for anyone who wants to win a t-shirt. And don't forget, we've got the Bonfire limited edition for the next couple of weeks. Hot pink logo t-shirt. Well, that's it. I've been your host, Cambo. You've been watching True Crime Island. And as I always say, don't forget to delete your browser history. Good night. Boomfuckalunga.